Okay, now I'd like to give the floor to the Professor KORIYAMA. She will moderate the panel discussion. And please use Q&A function and ask questions to them. And questions are accepted in both Japanese or English, and we will select and address them later as much as the time permits. All right. So, Professor KORIYAMA, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Takeda. So first of all, I would like to acknowledge all the speakers for your thought-provoking talks from various perspectives. So now, okay, let's start the discussion session. I think so. All three speakers are working in different fields. So before taking questions from the audience, may I ask you, is there anything you would like to ask each other about each presentation?
I think I can ask.
Okay, so please.
Yes, to Dr. Sho and Dr. KUNII, that since I mainly work at the community level, my question is how to bring up what we do at the community level to the national and global health level.
Professor Shaw, please.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I think that's a very, very important point. And I always say that a global framework is only workable if it is linked to the local level. Actually, after these three global frameworks, SDG, the Sendai and Paris Agreement in 2015, after all these three agreements came in, I did a search with the word called local in all the documents. Like one of the documents is 35 pages, Sendai was around 40 pages, Paris was around 27 pages, and so on. And I found very interestingly that in all the global framework, this word local appears extensively. In Sendai, within around 38 pages, the word local has been appeared around 40 plus times. In Paris, it was around 11 times. And if I am not mistaken, in SDG, it was around 15 times and so. And how this has been used, this particular word local, is local community, local culture, local knowledge, local adaptation, local practices. So I think nowadays, at least in the global framework, there has been more or less an understanding that to make it effective, we really need the local implementation. So in the global level, there are that type of at least understanding. But then there are lots of local practices which we need to make filter up in the higher level to make it applicable in different parts of the country and possibly different parts of the region or in the world. So that filtering process, I think it's we so-called the academician needs to possibly work very closely with other stakeholders. Many times the civil societies or what we call the NGOs or NPOs, they have lots of good practices. So at least I see my role as an academician is to learn from them and try to make at least certain level of basic principles which can be possibly applicable to wider context. Thank you very much for pointing out that very important point.
Okay,
yes, Professor, can you please?
Thank you. So I witnessed so much kind of variety of impact in the communities, even affected by very severe the disasters like Indian Ocean, the earthquake and tsunami. As you see, even in this great Eastern Japan earthquake, there is no kind of casualties in certain villages where especially school children are well trained for, kind of fleeing from that disaster. And I also saw that some of the islands like Nias in Indonesia, there was no casualties. because they have a kind of traditional kind of way of, that prevention. So we need some kind of, the framework and strategy at global, regional, and country level. But the real implementation should be done in a community level, and all kind of prevention, preparedness, and response, etc., should be done at community level. So how to lead those kind of community, because even we call, bottom-up approach is very critical, but who will support this bottom-up? So we really need to look at how to just make a real operationalization and implementation of those kind of actions at community level. So Goto Sensei really mentioned that some of the very good implications, but we need to collect more kind of evidence and data and information, and we need to apply those for the preparedness and the prevention. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Your very important question and their answers. So, are there any questions? So let me ask some questions. Actually, so Professor Shou informed us, so the information digitalization will be the next target. And so immediately after the Great East Japan earthquake or Kumamoto earthquake, so many people affected by the disaster were able to transmit or distribute information through SNS or internet, and were their opinion that it's a very effective way to gather information. There were also hoaxes that required confirmation of the truth of the information. So what do you think? So what is the effective way to solve these issues? So Professor Shou, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I think the SNS-based information, the quality is becoming better, and also the redundancy is also getting better. I give you the example in 2011, after the East Japan earthquake and tsunami, we did some research on this huge number of information which is coming up. That time, still there were not that much of AI-based information mining and so on. So that was actually one of my master students' research. We found that there is a huge number of cyber volunteers who were checking each and every information, especially from different types of shelters, like which type of things are required. And then they were making this validity. And then they made a liaison with the local government. And this was a very, very manual-based validation. And I found that that was a very invisible volunteers. And I personally actually interviewed some of those volunteers, and they were telling that they have been sitting in front of the computer, and their parents were thinking that maybe they are doing video games. And that time, like many people, like in their age group, they were actually going to the field and cleaning the debris and so on. But they were doing a very important work, very silent work, which was behind the computer screen. So that was back in 2011. But now, I think now we have lots of new tools to check different types of validation. Of course, we use very extensively the AI-based validation, and with the artificial intelligence, the quality of the information in the SNS becomes quite better. We also, very recently, we worked with NHK, the public broadcasting group in Japan, and especially on this issue, like how we make citizen a little bit more aware about this type of information. And we found that one suggestions came very strongly that this pre-trained volunteers network, what we call the citizen reporters, I think that becomes a very, very important group. So actually now there have been some programs where it's not only just NHK, many of the broadcasting companies, they now have some sort of citizens reporters where these reporters actually check the local conditions, the local information. They are the local people. They are registered with this type of mass media, and they become one of the major facilitator or to tell that what is happening in the local level. So I think these two aspects, one is the AI-based data mining and making it more reliable, and another one is more the community-based or the citizen-based reporting. Possibly the combination of these two things can avoid, of course, we can't have total avoidance, but at least to reduce the hoax which comes in the SNS. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Actually, in the COVID-19 pandemic period, so I felt similar things, and especially they are not specialists for the infectious diseases, but taking the reported number of the infectious, the patients or deaths, and they actually analyze the data. So that's such kind of volunteers will be also, very important. Yes. So do you, Professor Goto, so do you have any comments regarding the information through the SNS or other? Yeah.
Sure. Yes, I totally agree with Dr. Shao about the point of importance of citizen reporters, or in the case of Fukushima nuclear disaster, we called them citizen scientists, and they provided very important information about local external radiation exposure levels. And for tackling the issue of social media, I would say it is important to include in the first responders team the communicator specialist. The communicator specialist, specialist in IT technologies, and also these citizen reporters. And we also need to work closely we need to identify and work closely with local communicators. Like in my case, in my talk, I mentioned about the public health nurses and teachers. And also, including children, we can include citizens in the communication team. I think that's important.
Okay, thank you very much. Professor KUNII, do you have any comments on this?
Yeah, maybe I want to take up some digitalization and its application for disaster, especially like, future pandemic. This, COVID-19 was a real crisis, but at the same time, opportunities, because it gave a lot of application of this digitalization for contact tracing or isolation and, variety kinds. And also, visualization of real-time monitoring. Actually, when I was working in New York and Geneva, we usually use the data of a 1 year old or 2 years old. So usually the WHO's, the World Tuberculosis Report, AIDS report, all the kind of data analysis was done, based on the data 1 year or 2 years ago. But this time, that COVID-19 showed that the real-time monitoring, both mortality and morbidity, and even the evolution of the variants of this data. So it's really great opportunity, and even expediting the research and development of vaccine within 1 year. It is amazing. We couldn't imagine, less than 10 years we could deliver. So, AI could be used for even discovery of medicines and messenger RNA and the other new technologies we call a platform technology, and we could use for isolation and others. So there's so much kind of advance. So this year Japan will hold a G7 summit in Hiroshima, and I'm a kind of one of the member of a task force to provide a suggestion. So we are taking up the 100 days mission to develop vaccine, diagnostics, therapeutics within 100 days of the pandemic declared in future pandemics. So this digitalization or kind of new technologies, innovations is very, very critical for that one. And I also want to mention that the kind of a civil societies or the community participation, because as a professor told that this kind of participation is quite important. So it is not only just SNS as information sharing, but at the same time application development. So as you see in Taiwan, it was the digital minister really developed that application for the mask availability. But it is not only for him or government to do that. The many, the civil, the people, individuals supported that. So that kind of a new way of participation and development of new technologies would be very, very important solution for future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Actually, now we are having many questions regarding the digitalization. So one question is probably this is for the Professor Shou. How to manage the digital growth in a good way to decrease the effect of in disaster? How to minimize the hoax in the digital era in the disaster condition? Can you give us some advice?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think for digital growth, it's actually a quite challenging thing, and possibly there is no one, I will say, one solution fits for all type of thing. There are different aspects, and based on the local condition, based on the country's condition, I think we need to customize. But as I mentioned, the main worrying thing is this digital divide, which exists over last 10 years. And even with all the commitments or all the different types of investment, I saw the graph where over last 10 years, this urban-rural digital gap is still remaining around 30-35%. Both are growing, but it's growing parallelly, not converging. So I think that is a quite worrying issue. And that, when I say that there is a challenge in the digital infrastructure provision, possibly in some of the developing nations, then also digital literacy, I will say that, yes, we often say our generation Z, which are the new generation, say, for example, our students, they are very much digital native, but the elder generation who possibly need the help the most, sometimes may be quite vulnerable. They are possibly still isolated from the digital coverage. So how we can make a digital literacy more inclusive? And the last point is, I think that's possibly the technology provider perspective, that how we simplify the tools. Because ultimately for an aged person who is possibly 80-year-old or 80 plus, who is living in a remote small village in the mountain slope, they are, even if we have a very good high-tech early warning system in the smartphone, but if he or she does not access that smartphone, it's of no use. So very simplified technology. So simplification of the technology to make it accessible for all different types of age groups. So these three things: one is the digital infrastructure, digital literacy, and simplification of the technology. I can say possibly a combination of these three. There are possibly many other things, but at least the combination of these three things possibly help in reducing this digital gap. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There is one, probably this is a comment from the Australia. How about going through the school system, which means students are the carriers of information to elders. So students are very good at absorbing the information and bringing it home. So since Professor Goto is working at the primary school, so what do you think?
I totally agree about her comment that students, we adults can learn a lot from children. I think when it comes to the matter of children as one of the vulnerable group, we should collaborate with them as equal partners and listen to them because they know about their own environment and they're able to act on their own as active citizens. And I think we should more encourage that. And in addition to this, her comment, I really would like to respond to one of the comments written in Japanese from a doctor working at a health center. May I? She asks about the ways to communicate with children in this world with lots of social issues. And I agree with her comment that it is important to provide a safe place where children can be open and to talk with and to discuss as equal partners with the adults, including parents, teachers, and so on. And for doing so, I think the important point is that the adults, I repeat here, that listen to them as equal citizens so we can incorporate their views in our disaster preparedness and disaster responses.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me move another questions. Actually, this is regarding the disaster management. So is there any academic degree or training program who can be specialists in disaster management rather than deeping on volunteers, especially among the countries who has no developed training existing? So probably Professor KUNII, do you have any information of that? Yes.
Yes, of course. There are so many training courses or even academic courses of master or PhD, especially, for example, Johns Hopkins could provide a master course, or even there is some kind of center of disaster management or kind of things. And UNHCR, IFRC, ICRC, and other kind of international organization or international NGOs also provide a good training course. And in Japan, we also introduced some special course, special practitioners. We call it HELP. I forgot the exact, words, but it is a kind of health emergency or emergency response or kind of things. But there are so many courses, even short and long. Short one is maybe 1 or 2 weeks, and the long one is maybe 1 year or more than 2 years. In UK, maybe London, Liverpool provide some kind of courses quite related to the response to pandemic. Nowadays, there are also quite a special courses in the pandemic, and there are kind of network of surveillance of that one, and there are some training courses. So you can see even in Japan or other countries, there are so many courses. Please join them.
Okay, thank you very much. Very informative information. So, Professor Cho, so yes, please.
Yes, just on that particular topic, like I've been promoting this higher education in disaster risk reduction over now almost 15 years or so in the Asia Pacific region. Also now we have global alliances with KUNII mentioned about UK, some of the US universities, even in Africa also. Like when we try to analyze that, these are it's important that to understand understand which university or which department hosts this type of courses. There can be diploma course, which is short-term, or certificate course. Then there is a master's or PhD. In some countries, there are also 4 years undergraduate program, say, for example, in Bangladesh, in India, and so on. So we found that there are 3 major disciplines where these are rooted. One is the science and technology institutes. So either in the faculty of science or faculty of engineering, they have something on the disaster risk reduction, and that is very much focusing on the science and engineering aspects of it. Then another one is the social science aspect of it. So many of the social science or humanities department, they host also many of these type of courses. Very recently, we found there are some management school which actually also host some of these courses. And they teach more on the governance aspect, on the management aspect, sometimes possibly on the private sector, business continuity, and so on. So depending on the interest of the participants, they can actually go whether for science and technology-based course or the social science humanities course, or more on the management or the governance-related course. But there are quite a bit of option. But one thing we need to keep in mind that ultimately when you graduate from that course, where is the market? Like where he or she can be absorbed. So far, our analysis shows that most of the people who are working already somewhere, maybe a government officials, maybe some UN officials, maybe the NGO workers, they are working and then they opt for that type of course, and that actually gives a value addition to their work. But if it is just a regular student who comes directly from the undergraduate to masters, possibly we need to think about the proper career guidance of that particular person so that he or she can really utilize all the knowledge they are getting through this course. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So there is one question from I think Miss Kambara-san. So from nursing section of SCJ. So she wants to know for adaptive governance to disaster and health. So what kind of research and practice is lacking? So that is in Japan or maybe in the world. So expected. So do you think so? We need what kind of research we need to do in the future? Do you have any comments? Oh, Professor Shaw, yes.
Yes, I think, I personally work with Kanbara Sensei very closely. So we have been discussing this. I think the reason she brought this particular question, I think this is a question we need to think collectively. It's because this is such an important issue that ultimately when we talk about this adaptive governance, many times it is happening that we do lots of ad hoc decision making. The COVID has showed us that, okay, we do trial and error, it fails, and then we try to do something else. We make a scenario that the COVID will have this type of scenario, but then there is a new variant comes and we always try to do that. And that's what I call adaptive governance, which is good, which is obviously that's how we progress. But possibly I think that there's a very important issue that in the I won't use the word multidisciplinary, because many times multidisciplinary is just bringing different disciplines together, but it is more the transdisciplinary research which possibly is required, where we just not only bring our different disciplines, but we try to solve that problem collectively with our own expertise. So whether it is the nursing, whether it is the public health, whether it is the information science, whether it is the risk governance, whether it is the pure engineering solutions. So we need to actually bring them together and co-design something which possibly can have a very strong link to the implications at the implementation level. So many times we design lots of solutions sitting in our nice laboratory, sitting in front of the nice fancy computer. But I think understanding the field realities and try to learn from the communities, and then try to see, like what we usually use the word like co-design, then co-produce and co-delivery. I think that is the process which is very much required for this type of research, and the transdisciplinary approach is very much required. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So there is one question from the public health nurse. So, so it's in Japanese, so I will try to translate. So she thinks it's important for children to have hope to involve young children for the future. But at the same time, so she is worried about the children exposed to daily use of environmental destruction, conflicts, and infectious diseases at school and at home. So so actually the children says worry about the future, their future. So in fact, so she doesn't think there are many factors that are discussed that give us cause for optimism. And also I try to focus, she tries to focus on the resilience, on the serenity that we can feel in our daily lives at home. I feel that it is it's kind of like a treatment. So do you have any comment or advice in that situations?
Dr. KORIYAMA, I briefly responded to her comment in my previous response. And I agree with her that it's important to provide a safe place where the children can feel safe and peace, and the resilience building of young generation is very important. And I think by talking with them about what is happening in the environment and by valuing what their opinions as a citizen, equal citizen, that would be very important for us adults to be able to understand their perspective and incorporate that into disaster preparedness. That was what I mentioned previously.
Thank you very much. Professor KUNII, so how is the situation in other countries?
You mean children or?
Yes, children, yes. yeah, based on your experience.
Yeah, it depends, but because I have been working for more than 130 countries, so Latin America is quite different from Africa, and Asia is also quite. So anyway, important thing is, how to just build a real kind of good system, a social system and health system in a peacetime, and could be, prepared and prevented in this, emergency time. And also it could be related to Kambara-san's question, but we need to have really transdisciplinary kind of approach and research and etc. It means not only just, variety of experts working on that, but even including that regulations, law, and social system, etc. Such kind of, the social mechanisms also need to be considered and strengthened for that one. So especially children are quite vary that in the situation, even satisfaction, perceived that happiness quite different. Sometimes, Japanese children's happiness or perceived satisfaction is considered a bit kind of low. But, anyway, in a peacetime, how to just build a real kind of a peace and a good satisfaction, or we can tell that the well-being. So that is really kind of connected to the situation in the emergency situation as well. So I feel, in the peacetime, we need to look at, as I said, the worst case scenario, meaning variety of risks we have. And there is no zero risk, right? But we have a kind of likelihood of, that occurrence and also impact itself. So we really need to have a, good risk assessment, and also a kind of preparedness and prevention, and how to make a variety of sectors, experts, and the social kind of the people also putting together to respond. That is a quite important one. Currently, I'm thinking. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so there is another questions. Let me try to translate. So today's topics is a disaster and health, but so actually we are focusing on the natural disaster, but this comment is regarding the another disaster. So probably the Japanese government seems to be considering defense by force, but so have you considered the measures for evacuation, rescue, food supply, etc. For the citizen in the event of invasion by another country or terrorism by an organization inside or outside the country, outside of Japan? So I think this is a little bit, so our topics is more focused on the natural disaster, but if you have any comments on these questions, yes.
Can I? Yeah, since I was working, I was living in Switzerland for 9 years. There are kind of nuclear evacuation kind of the center, or even in an ordinary, apartment, there is kind of under, the ground shelter. So, many countries are kind of prepared for such kind of, the invasion, especially as you see in this Europe and Ukraine war. There are lots of kind of threats. Maybe their kind of perceived threat is much higher than us. But of course, in Japan also, as you see, there are some geopolitical kind of threats. That is why we really need to be prepared. But to what extent? Because, creating the nuclear shelter every day, every household or apartments could be very costly. So it's really kind of balance between this likelihood and the cost itself. But the important thing is we just imagine the worst case scenario. What happened? It is not only nuclear, but also biological, and cyber and others. So we really need to imagine, and kind of even, on the paper, we can just simulate what kind of, impact we'll have and how to mitigate or kind of minimize. Because as I said, we cannot clear any kind of risks. Anyway, we'll have some kind of consequences, but how to minimize is another kind of a question, and we can do that to minimize. So we really need to be prepared and do such kind of action as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, to prepare the nuclear weapon, so that is quite difficult for the for us. I mean, for the general people. So, okay, and let me take another questions. And so this is a question. Okay, so I would like to ask about the crisis intervention and management course. Sorry, so the that is already we already asked. We already answered to that questions. So, okay, so let me ask another question. So Professor Schultz mentioned the new word. So what is your new word? Science partnership in your slide. So can you explain more? So I think so the involvement from the private sector is also necessary. And can you add some more?
Thank you. Yes. Let me tell you a little bit history about this entrepreneurship in this particular topic. It actually came with one of my conversation with the famous Nobel laureate from Bangladesh, Muhammad Yunus. Maybe some of you know his name. He started this Grameen Bank, which was to develop the women's entrepreneurship and providing them different types of job opportunity almost 50 years back. And that created a huge movement among the rural women. And then that's how this whole Grameen network started, and that got his significant recognition, and he got this Nobel Prize. But Nobel laureates not in economics, but very interestingly, he got the Nobel Prize in Peace. So that was a very, very interesting thing. So when I know him, and we have been discussing for several things. He was telling that, look, we have so many job seekers in our world, but there are very few job providers. After any degree, our young students, they always go for a company to seek for a job. Why can't we turn different types of challenges? We have so many of social challenge. Can't we turn some of the challenges as opportunities to provide jobs for others, or job creator rather than job seeker? And that's actually what we call the entrepreneurship or entrepreneur mindset. Now, I have seen so far there are different types of entrepreneurship skills developed, whether it is in Japan, whether it is in other Asian countries, or in Europe, or in Africa, Latin America, and so on. But in this very specific field of disasters, climate change, or sustainable development, still this whole entrepreneurship is not that much prominent. I worked with some of the youth group from these Asian countries, and we developed what we call the EU Inspire Network. It was supported by UNESCO initially, started from Indonesia, and then gradually actually spreaded in different places. So while I find that the youth movement is very important for climate or disasters, we often see that all the COP has so many of youth protests and so on, which is very good. But also what we need possibly is to bring this youth power in science and technology and try to make some sort of new changes in this entrepreneurship mindset. So that's how we use this word called science and entrepreneurship together, sciencepreneurship. And I personally started one small unit for that based in India. And what we are trying to do is we work with different universities in India. We started with India in this particular work, and try to develop the incubation center in different universities where different disciplines come together, but with very specific target on applying science, technology, and innovation for solving some of the SDG issue, climate issue, or disaster risk reduction issue. And we also have some collaboration with Keidanren, which is the business federation here in Japan, as well as the equivalent to that, which is called FICCI in India, which is the Federation of Industry and Commerce in India, where we bring the private sector for the mentoring, because ideas are one thing, but to bring your idea into the market and develop that market need a little bit of mentoring, and possibly that private sector people who has seen the different types of mentoring can actually develop that one. So we have the core science and technology, but trying to bring the private sector together with different disciplines and try to start this particular movement. It is still in very small stage, but I thought that even if it is one small change in the positive direction can make the world better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, I have another question. So online medicine has become quite widespread, even in countries that are considered developing countries. But in Japan, so why is the digitalization of medical care not progressing in Japan? So what do you think? What is the reason? Do you have any comments? So compared to other developing countries, so Professor Kuni, do you think we are behind?
Yes, we are behind. Actually, compared to the speed of not only just telemedicine or e-health, but other kind of digitalization or digital transformation, very, very behind. If you look at the kind of immigration in an airport from the abroad to Japan, it is a kind of shocking. So long queue and with so many papers to write down the same name and address and that mobile phone. But if you travel in Europe, just 5 minutes, maybe within 3 minutes, just putting all the kind of information digitally, and we can just pass through. So it is a kind of example, but other things. I'm kind of after 17 years, I came back to Japan, but it's so much kind of behind. So one of the thing in Japan is not only just in the IT field, but other field, lack of agility. Agility is a kind of identifying kind of issues and decide actions, maybe planning and moving to the action. It is very, very slow. I'm sorry to say, but I'm kind of struggling every day and try to kind of fight and try to, kind of promote the kind of speeding up or expediting variety of things. So it is my kind of contribution, but digitalization, telemedicine, all kinds of very, very slow. Maybe it is not only, maybe it is not the development itself. Research and development quite good, but maybe connection between academia and the industry, bit kind of behind. For example, development of this COVID vaccines is kind of product of a combination of venture and big pharma, for example, and also private-public partnership. But in Japan, it didn't happen quite well. And also the application of those kind of developed products due to the regulation and others also really kind of hindering. So there are a variety of bottlenecks in Japan. So you have to find which are real kind of bottlenecks to slow down or kind of hinder, and we really need to clear. Otherwise, the Japan cannot catch up with the global kind of pace.
Okay, so how about other panelists? Do you have any comments? Professor Goto, yes, please.
I would like to add something about, yes, we are behind. Based on my experience of running a project, developing an application for radiation protection and health promotion in a rather remote area in Fukushima. As a part of the response to the recovery after the 2011 disaster. And I would say, as Dr. Shou mentioned, the gap, the generation gap, and also the regional gap, these gaps are very important to be addressed in order to find out why we are behind and in order to speed up our digitalization. And it's kind of going backward, but from my perspective, I would say coupling the human in-person services with the digital tools, I think is the key to leave no one behind. Because when innovation comes into your community, it requires lots of changes in their daily life and behaviors, and it's not easy. And I think it requires lots of continuous human efforts to make these changes.
Okay, thank you very much. How about Professor Shou?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I think, of course, we did some analysis between Japan, China, and Korea on this digital growth issue over past during COVID, after COVID. And obviously, the result is very clear that China and Korea is much, much ahead of Japan when it comes to the digital growth. I think it's not only just that, as both of our panelists, Kuni-sensei as well as Goto-sensei mentioned, that it's not only just the technology which matters here, it's also it's a cultural issue as well. And they are possibly incremental changes. In Japan, like any changes are incremental. It's not drastic. So I think it's slow and creeping changes, which is possibly required, and something drastic if you bring, which is not possibly sustainable. So when you make this type of incremental change, I fully agree with Goto Sensei mentioned that we need some interface. We need an human interface which brings this technology to the people and which possibly connect. So possibly a hybrid system of digital as well as human interface together. That's a very, very important. Even if you think that the digital economy in Japan, possibly Japan in the OECD countries, it's one of the least developed digital economies. Still, like I lived in Kyoto for 13 years and I was in Kyoto University, and still in many of the shops in Kyoto, they only accept the cash only. And it's very clearly written that cash only payment services. So things are changing. Yes, 13 years back and now, possibly things are changing. But again, very, very slow change. So yes, one is that cultural issue, but also possibly, again, the little bit of regulations and the governance aspect is also sometimes very strict, possibly step by step. So, for example, if you see just the My Number systems penetration, this is a very simple thing. Like I give you the example of India, where this huge population of 1.3 billion, and there is a penetration of the equivalent of the My Number, almost 80%. 1.3 billion people, 80% penetration. And here we are talking about 120 million people, maybe still 30, 35, 40%. And we have to give some extra benefit that, okay, if you use the My Number, then you will get a 5,000 yen coupon so that you can use it in some places. So I think some governance system linked with the cultural issue, maybe a little bit of demographic challenges. So there are many different factors possibly we need to bring together to use this, the digital medicine, as well as this whole digital systems, bringing it to the people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So there is one question from he is officer of the local government, and at the same time, he is a graduate student. So he wants to know the possibility of the open course to improve the skill among citizens, not children, citizens. So do you have any information, especially provided by the university? So that is, so probably, do you have any open course provided by the university? Do you, Professor Shou? Yes.
I am not sure about Japan, but there are many other countries where there are many, many open courses. I give you an example to the person who asked these questions. You can possibly check the Khan Academy, Khan, Khan Academy, which is based in the US. And this gentleman, he was originally from Bangladesh, lived in US. He did his I think master's and PhD from US, and then started this one. And his main target was to bring knowledge to everyone at different types of course. So what he started, and that was, I think he started as a startup back in almost maybe 8-9 years back. And now it is one of the largest open source information, open course provider, not just source. Open source, of course, but also open knowledge provider platform in the US. And so they have all different types of things. Like if you are looking for something maybe at the high school level, you can choose very specific thing. If you are looking at the undergraduate, say for example, junior undergraduate level, the first year, second year level, then you can customize some of the courses for that. Then if you are looking for a little bit of advanced one, Then also there are some open courses. So this is just one example as Khan Academy. And there are several this type of courses or open, the MOOC, say for example, the open source module on different specialized version. Say for example, United Nations Environment Program, they provide lots of MOOC-based sources like the open courses for different environmental issues, whether it is the water pollution, whether it is the plastic issues in the sea, whether it is the waste management issues. So you not need to be a very certified person or a technical person. You just want to know something about the basic of this one. You get that course, and at the end you get the certificate. So there are availability based on the needs and priorities on the subject, on the level of the courses. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Very useful information. So I think so. I know you have the opportunity to talk or negotiate with health policymaker at different levels. And do you find any difficulties in the communication with the policymakers? So I heard some people said, so okay, we use a different language, so it's very difficult to communicate. So for example, scientists have received the training to present in the community of the science. And also we have the training to write a paper, but to communicate with policymakers or maybe the communities, so that is much difficult. So what do you think? Oh, yes, Professor Shaw, please.
Yes, I think that's a very, very important point. In my work with as the chair of the UN Science Technology Advisory Group for Disaster Risk Reduction, I often talk with different level of policymakers, starting from sometimes the science technology ministers, sometimes the local government, like the mayors or the governors and so on, or sometimes even the member of parliaments at different countries. Possibly, when you talk with a national level policymaker, there needs a different language. Possibly when you go to the local level, talk to a mayor or governor, that's possibly it's a different language. When you talk to a community's elected leader in the local community, that possibly needs a different sets of information. So I give you just one example. Say, for example, I work very closely in the IPCC in the last 6 assessment report, and we have done some excellent job over 4 years to make a very, very science-based, robust report. Now, when I go to a mayor, the mayor needs, okay, tell me what will be the sea level rise, if it is a coastal city, tell me what will be the sea level rise in my city in next 5 years when I am the mayor. IPCC does not provide that. IPCC talks about the regional level sea level rise in 2030, 50, 70, 100, when he is not there anymore, the mayor. So what I'm trying to point out here is, this is just an example, the climate downscaling, for example. When we do the climate downscaling, there are too much of uncertainties which arise. So it can be 20 centimeter, but with the downscaling formula, if you are not using the proper data set, it can often go to 30 centimeter or 40 centimeters. So there is a gap of almost 200% uncertainty. And as a scientist, then it is my pride that, oh, I'm not sure about that. The uncertainty is so high, so I can't tell it to the mayor that what will be the exact amount. So somewhere I feel that, yes, we all understand there are uncertainties. There are always data challenges in the developing countries. In Japan, we do the downscaling using the supercomputer, but not all countries can afford to have supercomputer or that type of intense data set. So there are certain level of approximation is required. But ultimately, the mayor needs 5-year period in his or her city. And that we, the scientists, are very reluctant to give. So there, I think a little bit of our mindset is required. We need to show them that what we are telling is not absolute truth. There are uncertainties, but at this point of time, with this data set, we can provide this much of information. So when we have the transparency of the information which we are providing, scientific information, and the interpretation of that science information at the political level, whether it is the same thing in the national or even in the local level, as long as we have this transparency and the proper interpretation that yes, there will be a little bit of uncertainty if you use this particular number, as long as we are clear about that, I think that we should not hesitate to talk about specific numbers at the local level. So this is just an example. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Professor KUNII.
Yeah, thank
yes.
you very much. I'm currently invited to a variety of government meeting at the parliament members. And I found that, they actually want to get good advice, quite actionable and applicable. But maybe we need some kind of good translation. Sometimes when I meet with quite top scientist or academia person, sometimes they use their own language, and also they provide data information which could not be absorbed or good for their crafting that policy and others. So maybe there is some kind of application or translation there. And other countries, actually, there are many think tank or consultants who provide a good analysis and even recommendation to policy. But in Japan, actually, that many high officials in the ministries have no time of being creative, and they are working very hard and busy with a variety of daily life. So some kind of support is needed for the really good creation of a policy and connected to budget planning and the action planning, etc. So I really recommend the academia to think about that and how to make that kind of suggestion or recommendation to the governments and politicians. And sometimes in other countries, we learn even in a master course or a PhD course how to this translate and support the country's policy. So that kind of a policy related research and practice is a bit kind of lacking in Japan. So I really recommend to create that kind of movement and also the human resources for that.
Thank you very much. Yes, Professor Goto.
I would like to add 2 points based on my experience of working at the community level. I often take the role of chairing meetings to make local government ordinances related to health promotion. And from these experiences, I would say one is that rapid stakeholder analysis in order to understand, oversee the situation and who is fighting for what, who is against whom. It's very important. And the second point I would like to stress is showcasing evidence in a very clear way. And this evidence should include not only the numbers, numeric data, but also quantitative data that are people's voices. So the people voices have strong impression, can put very strong impression on health policy makers. So these are the 2 points. And in relation to this, I would like to go back to the discussion about adaptive governance. What we can do from the academia is that for policy making and implementation of projects and strategies, we change. And right after the 2011 earthquake, because of the adapted governance, we keep changing, the policy keep changing. And around that time, as a researcher, when I collected academic information, all I could see was the bottom line with numerical data. But that was not what I wanted. I wanted to know the processes, how they reached to that point. And at this SCJ event, I would like to have people's attention on the importance of research that describe the processes. Sometimes these are not with hard data, clear numerical outcomes, but the description of the processes should be valued as one important research field. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think so those advice, very important, valuable advice. Thank you very much for the academia and for the scientist. So I think, okay, so we already answered. So there is one question remained. So for the Professor Goto, so your training program type of things be part of the school curriculum?
Oh, yes, of course. For the health literacy training for health professionals, these are already integrated into many nursing and medical education. And for the school health project, I have been implementing that at many school sites. So, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So, but your activity is limited in Fukushima. No, not only Fukushima. So you are trying to distribute the other part of Japan, also cross the border.
For the health, both for the health literacy and creative health project, these can be implemented in Japanese and in English, and that can be adapted. And that should be not adopted, but adapted to each community.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so I think the time for the end is approaching. So I would like to ask for a final message from each of the panelists. So could you give us your key point or message for us to be resilient to disasters? May I have Professor Scholes first?
Okay. I was thinking to go last, but okay, I will follow our moderator's choice. I think my keywords would be like my own learning. I would try to point out three things. One is like in the disaster resilience, we often talk about three things, three types of help: self-help, mutual help, and public help, which is very, very important. But, after this 2011 East Japan earthquake and tsunami, I learned a new type of help, which is network help. So how different types of organization, different types of discipline, different types of professionals, they come together to help each other. So self-help, mutual help, public help, and network help. This is absolutely the key for a resilient society, number one. Number two is what I mentioned, and I would like to emphasize that our risk landscape is changing and changing very, very dynamic way. So any risk management plan and policies possibly cannot cope with that very fast change, but it also need to evolve to address the complex emergencies or complex risk landscape, because it's not just only one thing we are thinking about. We have seen that there is one or two disasters happening, a prolonged biological hazards, which is the pandemic. So how we actually address that, that's the second point. And the third point is again on the technology. Yes, technology development is important, but we should not forget that it has to be a people-centric approach where no one should be left behind. So inclusive risk reduction is very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So may I have your message from Professor KUNII?
Yes, thank you very much. So we have so many lessons learned already, and also we are sharing that that kind of lesson learned beyond the boundaries, especially Japan, disaster-prone countries, and we have a very rich good practices and lesson learned. So please, translate those lessons and good practices in English, and please disseminate those, because I found that the good, knowledge and wisdoms are just only contained in Japan, in Japanese. So please do that. And the other one is, of course, this action is very, very critical. So how to apply and how to reflect those, lesson learned into a strategy and action plan. And as I want to say, we need that training and stimulation. Without, those kind of a real practice, we could not be responded or, prepared. So thank you very much for today's session.
Thank you very much. Okay, so Professor Goto, please.
Yes, I think there are two key words: trust building and, for my perspective, health literacy promotion. And the first point is the trust building within and among the public and the professionals, as disaster preparedness is very important. I think Dr. Sho addressed this already in a different word, using calling network health. And I think health literacy promotion is the key to such networking, communication, and achieving equity in access to health information and health services. Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much. So actually, Professor KUNII, I bought, can you see your textbook? And so I have one impressive word. I'm sorry. So this is not a chapter which you wrote, but from the Professor Ojima's chapter. So he mentioned, so we have to, from the information to intelligence. So that is very good word for us. So we have so many information from our experience, but we have to input our knowledge or intelligence for the futures. Okay, so because of the time limitation, I apologize that I was not able to present all the questions from the audience. Once again, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to all the panelists and the participants for active and fruitful discussions. Thank you very much. I will now turn over the chair over to Professor Takeda.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor KORIYAMA. And with this panel discussion, I think that successfully end, so that today's program is complete. So I'd like to again thank all panelists and speakers, and also the viewers, audience, for valuable contribution to this conference and day one. So tomorrow, we will start at 7 p.m. Japan Standard Time. Okay, so thank you very much again. And to all viewers, thank you for joining us today. Please answer the questionnaire through this QR code. Your feedbacks would be greatly appreciated. Okay, see you tomorrow, and thank you very much indeed. Bye-bye.